Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today I am joined by Katy Morgan from the Twitterverse. You might know her as Katy Face, and I am so happy to have her here on the program. And Katy, thanks for joining me for this episode.
I am so excited. I love listening to the couple of episodes I've been able to listen to. And so after, doing the little blog post for Women in Tabletop Gaming Month, I was really excited to come on and talk to you.
Absolutely. It's awesome, when I have guests on and then I connect with people that they know and get to know people that way. And it's really awesome, because I connected with you from Summer, whose episode, I think episode 99, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Summer's episode 99. And then after that release, like, you and I got connected on Twitter, and then it's just been such an enjoyable experience getting to see what you do on your streams and just following you on Twitter and getting to know you better.
I've enjoyed it a lot. I'm like you. I like connecting with people, mutual friends and stuff. And I feel like mutual friendships are always easy to build to deeper ones. So I like that.
Exactly. And we will obviously get to tabletop gaming and off the table later in this episode. But I wanted to start off with what I think you called your number one fandom, your number one thing that you are into. And I'm going to admit it right now. And I'm pretty sure your I think you are the first person to talk about this on the podcast. I'll have to double check that. But I've never seen it, and I've been recommended this show many times, and I've just never sat down to watch it, and that is Cowboy Bebop.
My favorite thing in the whole... I love it so much I have a tattoo dedicated to it, so the love is strong. I love it.
Tell me, how did you get into Cowboy Bebop?
So it came on Toonami on Adult Swim, like back in 2001, I think, maybe 2000. So I was young. I was like, maybe 9 or 10. Probably shouldn't be watching Toonami. I don't know the age limit on Toonami, but I remember watching it and falling in love with it. And I wasn't an anime kid. I didn't grow up watching like Pokemon or Digimon, any of that stuff. But this was one, like, I would have a bedtime and I would make sure my mom was in bed so I could sneak up and watch it and not get in trouble because I loved Cowboy Bebop so much. And as I grew up older, I didn't, at 10 years old, you don't really understand the ennui and the existential crisis and the loneliness that it's going through. And it was one of those shows, I think like in 2000 and maybe like 2014-ish, 13-ish, I started just watching some animes that I had never seen before. I watched like Full Metal Alchemist, some older ones, Trinity Blood, I think it was. But I rewatched Cowboy Bebop, and it just hit me how much I loved this show and how much, as I had grown up older, dealing, with my own things in life, this show really spoke to me.
What was it about the show? Like, because the only thing that I've heard, besides obviously it's an amazing anime series and everyone needs to watch it, is that there's a lot of comparisons from Cowboy Bebop to Firefly.
You know what? I can see that. So the thing with Cowboy Bebop is I tell people that I know, like, there's like this, weird connotation about being one of those anime people. I like anime. I think it's a really amazing art form, but I'm not like deep into it or anything. And so I think Cowboy Bebop is one of those shows that even if you are adamant that you hate anime, you'll never watch that stuff, weebs are weird, that low-key offensive kind of thing, you should watch Cowboy Bebop. It does sort of have that feeling of Firefly in that it's sort of this Western setting. So the main characters, It's a bounty hunter crew living on this spaceship called Bebop, and bounty hunters are called cowboys in this like future where Earth is destroyed and they're on Mars and Ganymede. It's a very cool space western kind of feel. So I definitely see that connection.
Gotcha. And I know that it's always on my list of shows to watch, but it's not something where I can just pop on to Netflix and be like, okay, it's time to watch Cowboy Bebop, because I'm pretty sure it's not on Netflix and therefore takes more time for me to try and track it down.
And see, I think I think it's on Hulu, but I could be wrong, because that those sites update all the time. I think the sub is on there, and I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, you have to watch the sub over the dub. I think that's pretty stupid, the whole argument over subs and dubs. People can like what they want. I don't care. Cowboy Bebop is one of those animes that I 100%, I think you need to watch the dub, because of the voice acting in it is amazing. Steve Bloom is the voice of Spike, the main character. And he is like, I think at one point, he may not be anymore, I'm not sure, but at one point he was in the record, what do you call the record holding book? Ripley?
Guinness,
yeah. Because he had the most voice acting credits. Like he's been Logan, I'm so bad at names and stuff. Wolverine. He's been Wolverine. He's been so many characters that like you would never realize it's him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the fact that like this role was so important to him, it really shows through. Like the dub acting is one of the best. It probably is, to me, the best dub version of any kind of anime that you can watch. It's so obvious the love that was put into it. It's amazing. Like that is one thing. This and the movie, there is a Cowboy Bebop movie that's sort of on along the series timeline, because I'm not going to spoil the end of the series if you've never seen it, but I don't agree with it. But it's obvious the love they put into this show, and I think that's one reason it spoke so much to me.
Who's your favorite character in the show?
I mean, I have to say Faye Valentine. She's a con artist, and she's an amnesiac. She doesn't remember where she came from. I believe I want to say that she's from Singapore in the show. It could be wrong, but I want to say that. And the show sort of deals with, she comes in maybe, I think, like episode 4. You get to see her like learning who she is and sort of seeing this relationship with this, like, I'm a sucker for found families, that whole trope. And you sort of see Faye learn that these people are her family, even though she feels like she's lost everything. And I really love that. There's an episode that goes strictly back into her, like her growing up. She gets a video from past Faye that she doesn't remember. There's like this one line, I don't know it exactly, but it's like, you're going to be annoying. You're going to piss people off at you, but you are going to do amazing things. And I think I cry every time I watch that episode. It really hits home.
That's awesome. I love when they get to have, in shows that you get to watch where they have those character moments and they get to have that growth, and just they get to dive deep into that, like the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me about that, like she's an amnesiac, and you're like, she's getting this video of like her old self. It's like just thinking about that, that's gotta hurt your brain of, well, I'm the same. It's like, it's me, but it's not me.
Mm-hmm. It's really, it's so, there are a couple episodes that always just make me cry, like snobby crying, but that one is one of them for sure. It's her learning that, she's lost everything, but it doesn't mean that like she's lost who she is. And I think that if you're ever like struggling with trying to find your place in the world, Faye is such a good character, because she doesn't have a place. She doesn't know her place in the world. She's just this, it sort of plays it for jokes in the beginning when she joins. She's like this sort of really overly girly, stuck up, gets on everyone's nerves kind of thing, because she's this random person who joins the crew, and she's a con artist. Like, she lies and she'll cheat the other characters and cards and stuff. But the more the show goes on, she softens, and it's such a good, I don't even understand how like 26 episodes of this cartoon, this anime, can get so deep into the human condition, but it does. It deals with so much existentialism. And I feel like every time I rewatch it, which I rewatch it probably 3 times a year, I just sit down and binge it for, 2 days and watch the movie as well. I always go through this like existential crisis afterwards, but it's a good existential crisis. There's differences, in your crises. So it's a good one.
Absolutely. Like there's always something. It's like, okay, what level crisis is this?
Exactly.
How can I handle this versus like the other crises that I have going on?
100%. And one of the best things about it, and I think one of the things that Bebop gets recognized for, and any of the director, Shinichiro Watanabe, I've probably murdered how I said that name. I'm so sorry. The music is one of the best parts of the show. It's just like that in his other show, Samurai Champloo, and he's done some other ones that music, even if he wasn't the director, like he produced. Mm-hmm. The music by Yoko Kanno is amazing. Like, you don't even have to know about what Cowboy Bebop is, whatever watch episode. If you can just put on the opening song or any of the songs, and they're amazing. It's one of the best jazz upbeat soundtracks that I have ever heard. I just listen to it, just the original soundtrack, sometimes when I just need to write or just chill out, because it's just so relaxing, and even the music tells a story.
That's always something where when you find the show, like the show will be good or the show will be great, but then that combination with a wonderful soundtrack just pushes things over the edge. And I think one of the things I love, and it probably will be the case once I actually sit down and watch Cowboy Bebop, but I love the shows where I can just listen to the soundtrack and picture exactly what's going on and know like the storyline beats and what they could be doing, and that's the true hallmark of like just blending everything together.
It really is. And I don't know the composer, just the ability that they have to put this all together, because it's set in 2071. That's like this big space future, but it's still really familiar music. There's nothing, it's not like, overly distorted or what you'd think like, quote unquote future music would be. It's this very down to earth jazz. Some of it's even Western music, because, some of the episodes take place out in the desert and stuff. It all fits so well with whatever scene is happening. And I feel like the opening credits are so iconic. I think it was earlier this year or late last year, Overwatch released the Junkrat and Roadhog short. Mm-hmm. It was so clearly drawn from the opening of Cowboy Bebop. Like, you can watch Cowboy Bebop and then watch things in other places, and you can see how it's drawn from it. That's how iconic this one show is. These 26 episodes in a movie were.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I think, it has that legacy of being one of those shows where it's pulling, like, you have these, and I'm not going to say imitators, but you have its influence even to shows that are going on today, where it's like you can see those references back to a show that's over 20 years old at this point.
Mm-hmm. And like, I know I think it was like 2013 or 14, somewhere around there, Space Dandy came out, and it was by, I believe it was also directed by Watanabe, I believe. And it's so, I think people have called it like a spiritual successor to Bebop. I wouldn't go that far, but it's so obvious. Like, he has this style, and this is a continuation of this style that he so perfectly put together in Bebop. Like I could watch any of his animes. Samurai Champloo is amazing. It is also a big one with music, but it does hip hop in a way that Bebop does like jazz. And there's like one episode where there's this samurai rapper who has like b-boys following him around, dropping beats. Like the mind of this man is so amazing to me.
I'm really excited to, eventually get to watch Cowboy Bebop because, like I said at the start, so many people have recommended it, and I just need to sit down and watch it, and then I can be included in all these great conversations about the story and music.
And I think like it's one of those shows I've had people, because, I talk about it any chance I get. It is my favorite thing. You talk about your favorite things, I've had people who have said they've never watched like the beginning and the end. They've always caught the middle of it, and they've always liked it. And like, you have to, it is such a full story. And it's even like, I think Rian Johnson, the one who just did the last Star Wars movie, like he said it has an influence on him. The last Blade Runner comic that came out was done by the creator. So like, it has such a spirit about it that's still alive today for a show that premiered in 98, I think. Yeah, so it's ridiculous. Like, I was 7 years old. I didn't think I would be in love with the show.
Oh my goodness. It's just, it always like gets my age too when people talk about how old they were when they start watching things. It's like, oh yeah, I was in college at that point. But, and the way what you just said about, catching things like in the middle. I remember way back in the day when it was like TNT and TBS would always show movies, and I had never seen the start of Shawshank Redemption. Like, I'd always catch it in the middle and be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch it, but I never saw the beginning until I would probably say a year or two after seeing that movie. It's just, one of those things where you catch the movie, you're like, oh, I like this movie, let me check it out, and then you never see the beginning.
I'm very bad about that, like flipping through channels and catching something in the middle, but then never going out of my way to finish it.
Yeah.
That is a bad habit of mine.
That's okay. Everyone's got bad habits. Now, beyond Cowboy Bebop, on the flip side of things, you are into what I guess, and it's really popular among like podcasts, because you can't really throw a stone without hitting one of these type of podcasts. And what I'm talking about is true crime. Like, there are people out there, and some people scare me with their true crime, like the level of true crime and how much true crime they listen to, but it is everywhere. They like, there are the comedy true crimes and like the serious true crimes, and I've got to know, like, what is it about true crime that you are just into?
So I was one of those kids that grew up. I had, full disclosure, I had cops in my family. My grandfather was a cop. My uncle was a cop. So I grew up very, I don't want to say numb, because that makes me seem like a cold person. I'm not. I grew up where that it didn't bother me so much. I knew it was a facet of life. Bad things happened. So sometimes I might have got on my uncle's work computer when I wasn't supposed to and looked at crime scene photos. I was a kid. But the fact that these people's, I think it's so weird that you have these people who are like genuinely in love with murderers. That worries me. That the Manson, fans and stuff like that. That's a little too far for me. But I started listening a couple years ago to My Favorite Murder, Sword in the Scale, these great crime podcasts, and it was really comforting to know that there are also people out there who are interested in it, not in a creepy, fanatical, celebrity type of way. Like I tell people, like, one of my favorite murder stories and true crime stories is like Ted Bundy. I'm not one of those people who would sit at his, trial crying because he was obviously guilty and a horrible person. I think it's the narcissism and the psychological issues that these murderers have that's always interested me. And like I talk about Ted Bundy because I read Anne Rule. She's a really popular true crime biographer, and she knew him personally. And I read her novel about him, and the fact that he thought he wanted to try to defend himself in court and did so, like it blows my mind the ego that some of these people have. And I think that's what really draws me in. I want to know what's going on in their heads.
Right. And I think, with the popularity of even TV shows like Law and Order or CSI and those kinds of shows there, it almost seems like those shows laid the groundwork pre-podcast like boom of true crime to get people into it. And then it just seems to have been just exploded. And I do have to say, full disclosure, like I do follow a few true crime podcasts for the actual hosts, but not the actual subject, because the hosts are really funny, but it's not where I'm like, because me and true crime, I don't think it's something that I could ever listen to. Maybe I could. I tried one of the podcasts, Last Podcast on the Left.
Yeah, see, I'm iffy about them.
Yeah, the one, like, they were recommended to me, and this was when I was first starting out, like even being a podcaster, and someone said, "Oh, you should listen to them." So I pulled up one of their episodes about and is about the Chris Benoit murder, who is a professional wrestler. He's one of my favorite pro wrestlers of all time.
A very interesting story too. I know that one.
Yeah, and I listened to their episode. I had to stop it because I couldn't take the way that they were talking about it, and then their conversation, like some of the stuff that they were saying wasn't even accurate on the pro wrestling side, which that's the thing that got me. I was like, well, if you're going to do a thing, like at least kind of know what you're talking about. And, not to say like that they don't, but it's just the way that their conversation was, whereas like you're getting a lot of these like pro wrestling facts wrong, and therefore I can't continue on. And then like, I don't know, just like with the way that they banter back and forth, it just wasn't my thing.
Yeah, I think there's a very thin line when you get into true crime, especially like the podcast and things like that, to walk between like being very flippant over it or romanticizing it. And I don't like things that do either that. I mean, I'm very, bad things happen, and we it's a horrible facet of life. We should accept it though. But you don't have to just brush it off and make jokes about it, especially like that, the Chris Benoit murder. That was a horrible incident. That like that was a murder family. Like that was very horrible. I never listened to their episode specifically, but I do know that feeling that you're talking about. A lot of the subjects they talk about are very just, I know they're sort of a comedy true crime, but there's sometimes you just have to remember you are talking about real people. These are real people whose lives were affected and taken, and that is a very tragic crime. Like if you ever, look it up on Wikipedia or, stuff like that, it was a very sad thing that happened in Chris Benoit's life, that he did something horrible. But if you look at the things that led up to it, I don't want to say it wasn't his fault, because it is his responsibility what happened. But there were horrible circumstances, steroids and the brain injury and stuff like that. It just makes sense,
Right.
And to have people laugh about it so flippantly, because that was an innocent family. And even him, he just lost it, and it's horrible.
Yeah. Which ones do you follow as far as like true crime stuff? What are your go-tos?
I am a very firm My Favorite Murder listener. I'm horribly behind on my podcast right now, all of them. I've just been so busy. But that one I liked because I like the fact that Karen and Georgia make you feel like you're just having a conversation with them. You're just sitting there. And that's something that I enjoy because they take it seriously. There's still some moments where you can laugh because, you know, the real world is funny. But I like the fact that it's a very casual conversation with them. I went and saw them live actually earlier this year in Nashville. And it was it was a good show. Like they do their research, they credit, you know, I know some people when they do research, they won't say, oh, this article was written by so-and-so. They act like, you know, they found all the information. Karen and Georgia are really good about crediting who they're getting their information from, if it's from random articles and stuff. And I really appreciate that sort of transparency.
Absolutely. That's one of the things where, and I have other friends that listen to My Favorite Murder too, and they are always talking about how the shows are always good. And I believe that even one of my friends went to go see them when they were doing their tour, and was like, "Oh, it was really good," and that they enjoyed it. And I do like that they have that conversational but conversational style of talking about it, and then like what you said, providing, like, actually crediting where they're getting their information from, because honestly, like, a lot of the stuff has been covered so many times by other sources, even, newspapers or TV shows or magazines or whatever, and it's like you're not really getting a lot of new information. You're just kind of arranging it so that way it fits the style that you're presenting it.
And I always like the fact that even though they are talking about murderers, and this is always an important thing when I listen to true crime podcasts, even if it's, just a random one-off episode of a podcast I don't really follow. I like the fact that they keep the target on the victim. They constantly remind you that, yes, this person did something bad. We're not going to, we need to tell you the, facts of this murderer's life, but they're not the important one in this. The important one is the fact that this innocent person was lost. I love that kind of thing because it reminds you that I always go back to, they're real people. And if you think about, murders that happened years and years ago, I think it's easy to forget that they're real people because you're sort of hearing a story, but, I like that they remind you, this isn't about the person who took this innocent life. It's about the innocent person. Like, I want to hear about the victim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that there are the podcasts out there that do focus on that and remind people, because I think, like you said, I think people get lost in the subject and not the victim.
Exactly. I don't want to say I love murder. That's such a weird thing, and that'll be taken out of context, and I will be on a list now. I love learning about it, and I love, researching this stuff, but you always need to remember that this is a real person. You can, I think there's a certain point where you can disconnect yourself, but then you need to realize that this is reality, and you need to have a heart for the people. And that's why I like Karen and Georgia, because they do that. They have a lot of sympathy for what's happened, and while they're not glossing over it, they're still they're telling the story in a way that I think is very respectful.
Yeah, and that's always the good thing. And I'm glad that there are those podcasts out there that do that. And then even the ones where, like, I've heard of some, I'm not too familiar, but somewhere, like, they even start digging things up that maybe had been lost or not talked about, and then it gets, like, investigations going again, or at least, maybe kickstart something else. It's like, oh, that's awesome too, just even having that level of involvement of just getting that information out there, and maybe somebody will step forward and say something.
I mean, what was it? Michelle McNamara, she passed away after she wrote this book about the killer.
Like the Golden State Killer.
Golden State Killer.
Yeah.
It was her book that, that's always been a cold case, but it was her book that reinstigated this fire. and got him caught. Like,
Mhm.
that's amazing to me. I remember when that broke on Twitter, because I followed Patton Oswalt and I followed Karen and Georgia, and them all freaking out because it happened, and it happened because of her. And I think that there's always been, I mean, look at Anne Rule. She's made a career off of murder biographies. There's always been that little, people who love true crime, but the ability of podcasts have to reach out to so many different people with so many varying subjects in different ways. Like, if you want a comedy true crime podcast, if you want a serious one, maybe there's like Case Files or Sword and Scale, something like that. The ability for it to reach out and let people have this interest and get real things done. Like, her book I remember wanting to read her book because I heard about it on My Favorite Murder, and her book got a murderer caught. Like, that's amazing.
Absolutely. That's something where you're like, you're writing that book, and then what are you expecting to come from it? Like, sure, you'll get book sales or whatever, but for actually to have like that kind of action happen based on what your work has done, that's just incredible.
That has to be an amazing legacy, because, may she rest in peace. It has to be an amazing legacy to leave behind for her daughter and for her family. She did it. Like, I remember Patton Oswalt's tweet, like, you did it, Michelle. That was the sweetest thing. I think I cried because she helped a lot. That brought a lot of peace to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
That's an amazing legacy to leave behind.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely something where, as I just hope that, like, with the true crime podcast and the community, I just want, like, them to do good and to recognize the victims and to just make sure that everybody handles it the right way. Now, again, not a true crime podcaster, so I just say what is in my brain and in my heart about the subject.
I mean, I completely agree. I remember doing, like, on Tumblr, like, those deep dives. People romanticize, like, these killers, and I just don't think that I could never do that. Like, these are bad people. I want to know what's going on in their brain in, like, a scientific method, because I've always been interested in psychology, psychiatry. I think that's a very cool thing to be interested in. I don't want to marry them or send them letters in prison. I'm good. I'm cool. I'm good.
Yeah, even the people that are in jail just for, like, random crimes, and you come across like their posts and stuff, and you're like, hey, what like, write me letters. It's like, what? No.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't think you need to romanticize these people.
Oh my goodness. Now, for you, or for recommending people for certain, like, true crime podcasts, obviously, you're a My Favorite Murder listener. Do you have any other recommendations for people to check out?
I like Case Files podcast. It is a very good one. It is an Australian man, and it's weekly, I believe. He goes very deep into it. They are well-solved murders, or well-known murders and serial things, but it's also a lot of cold cases, which I think is very interesting. I think that it's cool to learn about things that haven't been solved. And I like that one. And I like Sword and Scale. That's another good one that sort of goes deeper and can sometimes be funny, but in sort of that same respectful way. Case File, I don't think I've ever heard one that's been funny. It's been sort of all serious. So if you're looking for a really serious one, that's a good one.
Okay, awesome. So if you are interested in true crime, like Katy is, but in the right way and not the weird way, then you should check out some of these podcasts.
Yes, in the right way. Don't be a creepy fan. That just don't even call yourself a fan, I guess. Probably you just enjoy reading about it. You're a researcher.
Oh my goodness. And I just have to give some personal love to some true crime podcasts before we transition out. Is that True Crime Fan Club and Moms and Murder? Much love from Tales from the Fandom, because I love you all as people and your podcast. So there you go. All right, now that that's out of the way.
That weird subject. I think when I sent you an email, I was like, can I talk about murder? Is that really creepy?
Yeah, we've had some interesting fandoms talked about. I mean, I've had people talk about Judge Judy and cooking TV shows. So I'm pretty much anything is a fandom, and I will take whatever.
I just didn't want someone to be like, oh, well, I'm going to send her a message on Twitter that she's weird. I know, trust me. Follow me for a day and you'll figure out how much I know.
Oh my goodness. Now, going from murder to the trope of murder hobo, for people that might get that reference, one of the things that we connected over was number one, Summer from Off the Table, and we'll get to that shortly. But you are into tabletop role playing.
I am. I'm relatively new, actually. I think maybe this is probably March was a year I had been DMing. So I've probably been playing for like maybe a year and a half. I grew up Pentecostal, satanic panic, man. That D&D, nope, you did not talk about it. That was Satan. So I always knew what D&D was. I knew that was something I always knew. I grew up actually like doing RP boards on, I'm gonna embarrass myself here, like Neopets and Gaia Online and things like that. So I had always loved that the ability to create like a story and stuff. So when I started watching Critical Role, which I think a lot of people have this similar story, and I loved the McElroys from, watching Monster Factory videos of my brother and me, I started listening to the Adventure Zone. I did not realize the story you could tell with dice. And it sort of shaped my own personal story, not a fictional one, my real life story. And I am so grateful for it.
Now, so you came from the background of, oh my gosh, you're going to learn how to cast spells and summon devils and everything else. And I have to say, like, even when, and my parents were not religious, like not at all, but they had this thing in the mall, like one of those little mall carts where they sold stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'd go with them just to go to like the bookstore and hang out at the bookstore for like all day. Like I was one of those kids where I'd sit in the bookstore floor and
Walden Books. I miss you.
And I remember picking up my first Dungeons and Dragons book, which is like second edition Dungeons and Dragons, and they kind of gave me like that weird look, but they didn't say anything about it. And it's like, okay, that's cool, And I know that there was some other people that I knew that it was definitely like off limits to them. Mm-hmm. Like, sure, you can play like the video games and stuff that's not Dungeons and Dragons and whatever, but it's almost similar, like Final Fantasy. However, mm-hmm. Dungeons and Dragons evil, not in our house type thing. So I didn't get started into it until I was in college. But so you've only been in the tabletop community for what, less than 2 years, give or take?
Yeah. I think this winter, December, will probably be officially 2 years I've been actually into the community.
Now, what beyond like the Gaia Online and the Neopets and everything, and that's cool, and everybody's got their start somewhere.
Yeah.
I did wrestling role playing online for like forever back in high school, where I was like writing my favorite wrestlers promos and being like, yeah, I'm going to take you out, and other people had to vote on like whose promo was better to decide mm-hmm. who wins the match and everything. What was it like? Okay, so you got Critical Role and you got like the McElroys, but what happened after that? Like where did you go from that point of, okay, here is this, I now want to do it?
I was on Tumblr for a long time. I had a lot of friends from Tumblr there, and I started talking about Critical Role and how I had, a lot of it was being a woman and seeing people play D&D like in college. You sort of didn't feel welcome. But online, I would post, hey, I really want to play D&D. And I had a friend who was willing to DM. She had some other people who wanted to play, and we started a Skype group playing. And I think this was 2016. Yeah, we started playing, and I fell in love the first session. That campaign didn't really last long. People got real jobs, and things happened. Scheduling is, I always say, is the true big bad evil guy in any tabletop game. So I fell in love, and I wanted to do more, and I went a pretty long time not playing any, just sort of consuming D&D media, and really, really wanting to play more. And then I just noticed that there was such a big community of it on Twitter. And that's sort of where I found my people.
That is, and I think I've said it on a few different episodes, but I had to join Twitter for like the podcast for promotion and just, putting it out there more than Facebook, because Facebook is very limiting. And Twitter, it's hit or miss, but the word gets out there. And the tabletop role-playing community on Twitter has got to be one of the things that has blown me away in how welcoming it is and how many people just embrace you. And like, they're like, oh, well, you need a game? Well, here's like 500 references on games or how to get involved in games, or, oh, you want to try this game? Like, and I told somebody recently, I said, I bet if I said I wanted to run X game, even just random game that I have on my bookshelf, and I said, I put it out there, I bet I could find enough people to run a game within a day.
Probably not even that long. Give it 5 hours if you even need that much time. I mean, this community, I can talk in lengths about how for every 1 or 2 bad apples there are, because you're going to have them in every group. That's just, common sense. There are hundreds of amazing people in this community. I know, like, I had a couple of times where I have needed financial help so badly. And if you know me, I'm such a prideful person. I hate asking for help. I was raised, you suffer in silence, you get through it. I asked for help 2 times from the tabletop community in a day. I got what I needed. And I think I just sat somewhere and cried, because the kindness and it just reminds you that no matter how much bad is in the world, the spirit of people, of a community, it'll move you. And it's helped me that if it wasn't for the tabletop community, I say this, I'm a very big advocate about, talking about mental health and stuff, because I suffer from bipolar disorder. If it wasn't for the tabletop community, I genuinely don't know if I'd be here today. It's people that I have found who not only I relate to, which is always a good thing, but people who are willing to go beyond just talking about Dungeons and Dragons or, any other system, genuinely care about you. And you've maybe played 1 game with them. Maybe you haven't played with them. You've just talked to them on Twitter because you connected in a stream or something. They genuinely care. And that is, I don't think I've ever found that in any other fandom or community or anything. And it is one of the reasons I am here today. I say that full stop, 100% truth. The tabletop community saved my life.
Absolutely. And it's not only you. I see it with so many others in the community that I follow, where it's like, there are people doing check-ins. There are people like making sure others are okay. If there's a support needed, they're getting the word out to get that support. And I was just blown away that, because for such a long time, it's like Twitter was the evil place. You don't want to go on Twitter, but it's in this like fandom community, the tabletop community is just above and beyond amazing.
It really is. I have to say that if you can get past those couple bad apples you're going to find anywhere, and look to the deepness of how kind and giving these people are, it's the best community to be in. It really is. There's always someone there to hold you up. I don't even feel like streamers are competing in, getting spots. So many streamers out there are, they host you, they retweet your tweets about your shows, they watch your VODs, it's amazing. It is such a giving and kind place, and I don't think I expected that at first.
Mm-hmm.
I know as a woman, especially, you get that fear of, like, the stereotypical D&D person. I've never, I think I can count on one hand the times I felt othered or hurt in the D&D community, which is amazing. And they were things that, it was those bad apples. I always had someone to come to my defense.
Right, exactly. Now, on the subject of tabletop games, do you have any favorites that you like to play?
Well, I always play D&D. I will say, truthfully, I've been very lucky to be in a part of the community where I have branched out and played other games. That is something I never thought I'd do, because I came into this not knowing how to play D&D. But I always play D&D, but I don't think it's like even one of my favorite systems anymore. I love Powered by the Apocalypse games. Those are my favorite. That's my favorite system in the whole world. Yeah, I love the 2d6 system. That's just, I love the idea that you can fail forward, because if you fail a roll in any kind of apocalypse system game, you get XP. You don't get that in Dungeons and Dragons. If you roll under the DC, you failed. That's all there is to it. The idea of failing forward is great, and I think that's why I love that system. I've played Monster Hearts, Monster of the Week. There's so many games with the Powered by the Apocalypse system. I can't even name them all, but that's definitely my favorite system. With a close second being Call of Cthulhu. I love Call of Cthulhu. I think it's a great game. And I will say my least favorite is Pathfinder. I'm so sorry. Everyone's going to hate me, but I just can't get my head around it. And that's my own fault. I don't like number crunchy games.
Gotcha. And I have to say, I took to Pathfinder only because I didn't like 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and neither did the rest of the group that I was playing with. And we were like, there's got to be something else out there, and we switched to Pathfinder because it was basically like 3.5 D&D with a few extra things.
I've heard that. I've never played. My only edition I've played is 5th because I'm so new, but I've heard that it is basically 3.5.
Right. It relatively is, with, there's some changes and additions, and they do a few things differently, but otherwise it plays like 3.5 D&D, and that's what I was happy to play with after dealing with 4th, which I want to put it out there. I don't hate 4th edition. I think that it handled stuff really poorly, and I think Dungeons and Dragons with 2nd, 3rd, 4th edition, combat took forever.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I can't stand is combat that takes 5 hours.
So I run a home game that isn't streamed or anything, and I run it for 7 players, 6 or 7. I have a big group. And we have all decided, combat's going to happen. It is Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to have adventures. We go through that as quick as possible. If I can group enemies up and have them all hit at once, I'm going to do that, because we play to RP and tell a story. If that's not your thing and you love combat, cool. All the power to you. I can't. I hate those kind of games. I don't want to say I hate them, because I've played them and enjoyed them. I think it matters on who you play with. And I think that's for anything. But I am always going to pick a game with storytelling over combat. I think that's just the kind of person I am. That comes from, the Neopets RP.
Yeah, with combat, I know for when I run Tales from the Five Nations, because we're using Savage Worlds rules, if they come up against people, generally they're like minions, and it's just as long as you hit, they're dead. So I
Yeah,
can have as many people on the combat field essentially as I need to, but there'll be only like the one or two like actually like NPCs that if they don't get to, like, they'll become like recurring baddies occasionally.
mhm.
But it's like obviously there needs to be combat, but I don't want it to drag. So yeah, minions.
I'm exactly the same way, and I think tried to give them in this game at least. They might come across a couple of minions here and there, but I'm much the same way. There, I change that HP very low, or I change the AC low, so it's easier to hit them. I try to keep it where each arc we do. I stick to like character arcs, group arcs in my campaign, and they have one big bad guy. That's what they have to fight, or they have one big puzzle or one big dungeon delve. I don't like to throw all of that in there every single session, because I'm like you, I hate combat that lasts forever. And if you have a big group, you're screwed.
Oh yeah, and that's always the big problem. I remember playing with the group up in Charlotte, which we talked off air about them, but Jim was a part of it, and it got to the point, and it was also the advent of the iPhone. Like the iPhone had just started coming out, and I remember getting so upset because number one, I didn't have a smartphone or iPhone or anything. I still have my little flip phone, but it was like, dang, there's like 6 or 7 of us doing the combat. People aren't paying attention. They're getting distracted on their phone. Can we please just pay attention to move this thing along so we can get back to the story?
Exactly. If I can't, I always even try to tell my players, hey, next week it's going to be a fight. That it might go a little longer, something like that. I want them to prepare. Some people might hate that because they might consider it meta, too metagamey. A lot of times I don't tell them what they're fighting. They don't know the details, because even if it seems like a, monster manual monster, I always try to add in something different, reskin it some way. But I always want them to know, hey, next week you're probably going to have a fight. This session might drag on a little bit. Just prepare yourself for it, because I know I would appreciate that as a player, because I'm an RP based player. That's how I am. I'll hit things if I have to, but I don't want to all the time.
What's funny is, again, tabletop role playing game on the Twitter community is, I didn't know there were so many games out there. And I have to say, back when I got into it, it was like there was D&D, and there was like the White Wolf, vampire and werewolf, stuff like that. There was Cthulhu, there was Rifts, there's a few other things, but they weren't like the big ones. It's like D&D and White Wolf, Star Wars were like those big games that I played. And I talked to James D'Amato from One Shot.
Yeah.
He was like, Kickstarter is one of those things that has really affected in a very positive way getting stuff out there, because you don't have to get a printed book and get it into a bookstore. You can do direct to PDF, and it's like you're getting stuff out there. And now it's like there's games literally of any type, any game, any flavor that you want.
I didn't know you could have games that didn't have a GM, but those have slowly become some of my favorite systems. Ben Lehman's Polaris, love that system. And it's a GM-less game. Heart of the Deernicorn, BFF, Fall of Magic, those games don't have a GM. You play as a collaborative story. Avery Adler's The Quiet Year, it's a game you pull cards and you draw what you pick these scenarios on a card and you draw on a mat between you and the players. There's no GM. You are all as a group you're making a collaborative story, but you're also keeping each other in check. And you have trust. You have trust with each other. I didn't even know that was a thing you could do until I, started. Like I said, I'm lucky that I've been able to explore a lot of other systems, but those are some of my favorite games to be involved in, are GM-less games, because they're just fun.
Exactly. And it's funny with I think even influenced by where people live and what they get into, because we had talked about off the recording, Burning Wheel. And I remember my wife and I had moved up to New York City back in 2007. And I was desperate to find like a D&D game, a Star Wars game, any kind of game. And I put myself out there on like message boards, and the response was, yeah, we don't play that here. We play Burning Wheel. And I'm like, I don't even know what Burning Wheel is. Like, what is Burning Wheel? And that was like my visceral response, was because they're acting like super snooty about it too. Like,
Yeah.
City people do sometimes. Not to characterize like all New York City people, but the people that were responding to me were like nose in the air type. Like, we play
Oh.
Burning Wheel. We don't play Dungeons and Dragons. And so like that colored my perspective for a long time until I talked to other people about it. And I was like, oh, well, that sounds really neat. I just wish like it had been told to me in a better way.
In a better way. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. So most of the like you tend to like Powered by the Apocalypse is like your number one, like
I will play almost any. I think you can just throw a book at me. Hey, this game's powered by the apocalypse, and I'll go, oh great, let's do it. I don't even really care what the subject. There's a worldwide wrestling game that's powered by the apocalypse.
yes,
You like wrestling?
yes, I
Play
saw
that game.
I saw that. I think there was I think it was either Bundle of Holding or Humble Bundle had just they had a bundle of Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I picked them all up.
Yeah, I love the freedom of that system. To me, Powered by the Apocalypse, like Dungeon World for one, that's a great. In fact, I'm at the point where if you want to get into gaming, I tell people to play Dungeon World first. It's very easy to pick up. It has all of the classic tropes of Dungeons and Dragons. You have your same classes. It's a dungeon delver. I think it's more free, and I think it's more narrative. It's more based to build a story and a narrative with. And so that's why I love it. You just need 2d6. That's all. That's all you need to do. The GM doesn't roll any dice. You tell a story with them, and it has all these great options that get you involved as a player. Like there's a spout lore. If you roll, I think a 10 plus, and you make up the history for this thing you're asking about, it becomes canon. I think that's so great to tell a story. And it's very simple to pick up for people.
Now I've got to ask. So obviously, Powered by the Apocalypse games are your go-to, and you got your Cthulhu and some others. What kind of characters do you find yourself playing? Like, do you play a range, or is there like a certain character trope that you lend yourself towards?
I like to think I play a range. Doesn't everyone? I want to think that I have a broad spectrum of characters, and I really do, because I like to base my characters around like what their class is, what I think their history is. I'm a very big backstory person. Mm-hmm. I love backstory. Even if I don't give it, my DM doesn't want it, I know it in my head. This is why they're doing this. This is where they come from. So like in some of the games I have, I play a paladin in one game who is she was raised very naively. Her father didn't let her fight. So she sort of Mulan. She ran away from home because she wanted to prove to her goddess that she was capable. Then in another game, I play what I started out calling her with a lot of love. I called her Cersei Lannister Light, or Walmart brand Cersei Lannister. So she was very. This is my Burning Wheel character actually. She was very like. I took all these skills, like I took skills in seduction, I took skills in persuasion, because she had been raised as a noble to, make her place in the world through any means necessary. So, and then another game I played is sort of popular Queen Bee type of character, but didn't go with those tropes of being like the Regina George or Heather Chandler mean girl. So I like to think that I can play a variety. And I think that's why I love one-shot games so much. There's a channel on Twitch, if you don't follow, you should, Scraticus Academy. Mm-hmm. It's great because not only is it welcoming to people who have never played before or played on stream, it's just a very big variety of people. And I love diversity in games. You got to play with different people. But I love picking up one-shots there because I can sort of stretch out these tropes or these stereotypes of characters that I've been wanting to play. And I think that's always fun. Like one day I can play a brooding rogue, and one day I can play a happy cleric, or I played a celestial warlock whose patron was Suni, which is the goddess of love. And she was a matchmaker, and it was the most it's the character that annoyed me. Like I was playing her and she annoyed me. So yeah, I love one shots because I think they're a really good way to stretch your abilities of playing other characters.
And speaking of Twitch, you are all over it.
Yeah.
So you got into tabletop gaming. You transitioned from like watching Critical Role and the Adventure Zone, and you got into gaming, and then all of a sudden here is Twitch, which again, this Twitch streaming, like I didn't get it at first. Like I don't get it. And I guess part of it comes from the background of when back in my day, they always promised like online gaming and never came through. And it finally has evolved with like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and those type of things where you can actually play your games online. And then here's Twitch, and I'm like, I don't know anything about Twitch except that people watch other people play video games. But now it's like role playing has exploded.
Yeah. I 100% would not be able to be into games as much as I am if it wasn't for Twitch and Twitter and the community, because I live in a very small town in Alabama. There's not a lot of availability around here. So last August, it's always a funny story because it was 100%. I don't know if I believe in fate, but this was fate. I had missed an episode of Critical Role, so I had put, the hashtag on mute, and I think I had muted some people who I knew tweeted about it regularly. And a couple of days later, I happened to unmute this one user, and someone had tagged them in a tweet from Summer, talking about Off the Table. I want to start a show for DMs by DMs where we give advice. And I just sort of stared at it and sat there for a long minute. Like at the time I had only been DMing for not even a year. So I was like, I don't think they would want someone new, but I'm going to send a message anyway. And that day, I think like August the 10th, because we just celebrated it, I think was the day that it changed. Like I bought a camera, I bought a mic, and I got into streaming, and I have been with Off the Table since the beginning. And it's probably one of the things I'm really, really, really proud of.
So I know obviously like I talked to Summer about Off the Table, but for people that maybe have not listened to Summer's episode and they're starting off with your episode, or, they jumped in with the more recent episodes, what is Off the Table and what do you do?
So Off the Table is this community. It's one of the most welcoming and inclusive communities that I have ever been a part of it. And I would never be ashamed to have my name involved with Off the Table. So we stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights through the week. Summer started this wonderful community full of DMs who were perma DMs, basically. They never got a chance to really play. And it started out as an advice show. Then she started a game. Then it went into season 2 where there were more games. Then season 3 and now we're coming into, I think, season 4, and we have games every week, every night of the week, bi-weekly. So we're running totally different systems. We've run so many different systems from Mouse Guard to Warhammer Fantasy to Mutants and Masterminds. It is just such diversity in the type of system. So there's something for everybody. And I don't want to get mushy, but like I found my best friend Summer through this thing, and I became a staff member, and I do the communications. I run the Twitter. So if you ever see a stupid meme, it's probably me. I help reach out to people about getting them involved in games and stuff. And it is one of the most fulfilling things, because I've met true friends because of something that she did, and I think it's really great.
So with Off the Table, obviously it's streaming games. People have their webcams and microphones and everything else. What goes into it as far as like, how do you decide what games are going to be played, or is it just like whatever the person that's running the game wants to run for the couple weeks or months or whatever?
Usually before a season, we have like a sign up sheet for DMs. What kind of game do you want to run? What system? How would you run this? We get like a pitch, I guess you would say. And this season it was really rough because we only had one open spot. We had a lot of shows that were continued over or had been like sort of talked about during downtime that we really wanted to run. And so like last season was more, I think we ran like 6 new shows, I think. It's just, it all blurs together after a while. But we have people who pitch their ideas, and thank God it's not my choice, because Summer has to make the hardest choice to pick, what would fit well in our schedule, and something we've never had before, what kind of story would be told. I give advice, but thank God that's not my responsibility. When I had to pick players I run a game of Monster of the Week there. We're going into our 2nd season soon. And when I had to pick players, I stared at the list, I think for like 3 days, near tears, because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I just wanted to run it for everybody.
Right.
I can't, I don't know how she does it. Bless her heart.
Yeah, it's something where I talked to a few different people. I was like, I either was born too late or too early or something, because if I was younger, I would be like, every day would be game day for me. But it's like, damn, this adulting sometimes, like having responsibilities and work and making sure I even with doing this podcast, I can only record like two nights a week, because the other nights I just gotta make sure I have open, or sometimes I can't record at all. Like maybe the kids have activities or we're going somewhere. It's like, okay, but it's like, man, I would love to just game and try games and play games and everything. Like it's like that we're in this golden age of gaming, and Twitch streaming is like a huge part of that.
I am so envious of people who can make a living off of it, because it is such an oversaturated market. And I think maybe that's one thing I really like about Off the Table is it's not, and this is nothing against people who do make a living out of it, because I'm jealous. Don't get me wrong. I would love to make a living out of streaming. It's not for any type of personal gain besides we just want to play games. That's the only gain we get out of it. We get the chance to play games with our friends and play new system. And I think that's a really thing that draws me to Off the Table. And one of those reasons why I'm so proud of it is it's not ever been a selfish type of thing.
Exactly. It's like, because I'm in a number of like podcast communities on Facebook, and a lot of some of the people are going in there like, okay, well, how can I make money on the podcast? And the response is, you're not going to make any money. You're going to be paying money to do this. And it's the same with like even streaming for like the games that I see. I recognize the names, but I'm pretty sure everyone's just doing it to have fun.
I mean, that's 100% why I'm here. I just want to have fun. I'm starting to like do on my own Twitch. I have a ballad of my horrible internet. I finally got it fixed. And so I want to start running just, random one shots on my channel, playing games, because sometimes scheduling is just hard on bigger channels, and there's nothing monetary in it. I just want to play games with my friends. I live in such a small area that's a hobby that isn't around a lot. So these are people that I don't want to spend time with anyone else. I just want to play these stupid pretend games with my friends, make up characters,
Now I do have to ask, because I'm super curious. Like, how do you go about choosing the people for the game, as far as what's that decision process like of trying to choose for, like, let's say you're running Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
How do you take a look at the list of all the people that want to play and decide who's going to do it? Because coming from the tabletop, gaming community of sitting at the table with people, I mean, pretty much the group that you could find is the group that you're going to play with,
Yeah.
unless you can't, handle or deal with some of the people, and then you go find another group where you kick some people out. What's the process with all these people that want to play?
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else. I know when I was picking a cast for me, it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I knew that on our channel, Summer plays in all the games because she's the host. I mean, it's only fair. This is her channel. She should be able to play. I've always said that. I knew that I wanted her. I knew that I wanted another friend that I do other games with because she's an amazing RPer. But then I had these other spots, and I looked at this list of like, I think I had like over 20 people sign up for one, was amazed because I was in this headspace of who wants to play in a game run by me? I don't understand. But two, everyone who signs up for these games are talented. There's nothing not talented about these people. Everyone has a passion, and everyone wants something different out of it that's valid. And that was the hardest decision I have ever made, picking a cast for like my game specifically. I don't regret it though, because that has been one of the most fulfilling games I have ever played. These players are so into this world that they have created. They have written backstories, they've written fic, they have forged relationships in character. They like argue in quotes their characters back and forth in our group messages. I mean, it's amazing. And it's, as a creator, that's such a good feeling to see people care about something you're doing. So, I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but picking casts is hard, but it is a very fulfilling experience when you play your first game. And I knew this the first minute we played. Everyone meshed so well together, and the chemistry was automatically there. And I think that's just amazing.
Before we wrap up, what's the game, let's say like next season, because I know that the new season has started, so I believe so. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We're slowly getting into
Okay.
it. Yeah, we slowly getting into it.
Okay, so let's say next season. What's the game that is on your horizon of, I want to run this game?
So I am in the planning stages of, I rewatched recently Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yes, amazing movie.
And yeah, I've always loved that movie. And I just got really into this idea of like Dust Bowl Southern adventure, and I want to run a pulp Cthulhu story in that setting, because I just think of this Dust Bowl of these big dust storms. What could be lurking, in that dust?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've been. It's not fully in stone or anything. Like I don't even know if I'll ever do it, but that is one game that I would love to run, especially as I'm learning more about Cthulhu, because I've only played it. I've never been a keeper. But that to me is such a great setting to run Cthulhu in, because you're during the Depression. Everyone is sad. Everyone has no hope. What else would, Eldritch horrors feed on than this loss of hope?
Absolutely. And it is such a good, like, just based off the movie, and you think about like everything, like that kind of journey. It's like, and then just add in the Cthulhu aspects of stuff, and it's like, dang, that could be awesome. And
I'm such I say this to everyone who plays games with me. I'm such a loose DM. It is a joke in the off the table community that I don't know what rules are, and I refuse to read them and follow them. And it's not fully true. I follow the rules, but I am very much a rule of cool person over rules as written. I am very much a let my players, if they tell me something creative that they think they can solve this, sure, do it. I don't care. I want you to feel like you've done something great, as a player. And so I think that bringing that over into like a Cthulhu setting would be so great.
Absolutely. For those people who have listened to this episode and they're like, dang, I need to follow Katy, where can I find her on the internets? What's the best places to do so?
Twitter, always Katyface, Katyfaise. And I'm starting some just random streams on my Twitch channel, which is also Katyface. Basically, if you want to find me on any social media you think I might be on, it's going to be under Katyface. But I'm also a big member of Off the Table. I do a lot of streams with them. It's off_the_table on Twitter and Twitch. And then I just do various shows. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know what I'm doing. I have a schedule up. I'm constantly posting the things I'm involved in, things I'm not involved in. I just really love to places you'll just see me hanging out and chat, maybe in Twitch, because I want to support someone. Yeah, I if you want to get up with me, Twitter is the best bet. But it's also, I will, fair warning, it is not a professional Twitter whatsoever.
Yes, definitely fair warning, but in a good way. Like, it's definitely something where it might catch you off guard, but it's okay.
I have a brand, and it's bad. it's dumpster fire. So if you can handle that, come yell at me in my DMs. I will literally be anyone's friend and talk to you about any subject, anything I've talked about here, or just RPGs in general. Please come talk to me, because if you just want to yell your ideas at me, I love it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Katy, for coming on and talking about some awesome stuff. And whenever I watch Cowboy Bebop, I will let you know and be like, I watched it.
I am waiting on bated breath. I need you to watch it.
But I will have the links to your face, or not Facebook. I'll have the links to your Twitter and the Twitch on the show notes and on the Facebook page. And I just wanted to say thank you again for spending some time talking about some really cool things.
Thank you for having me. It was such a good honor to be here. I do love this podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes of things that, subjects that have interested me. And it's such a good, just down to earth. It's a conversation. It's not an interview. Like, just two people talking. And I love that.
Well, thank you so much. And I think someone said it best, is that not every episode of this podcast will be for everybody, but there's definitely an episode for everybody.
100%. Even I have to take this chance to drag Summer. Even if you like Twilight, you can listen to her episode. Oh goodness.
Well, we did balance that out with The Office, so
very good subject.
But we will catch each other on the Twitter, and everyone go check out Off the Table, because they are doing amazing stuff on their channel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.